I wanted to talk about and share something that I'm seeing a lot of at the moment. And actually, when I put up a poll recently on my stories asking you all what your, I guess, biggest barriers are to getting from where you are now to where you want to be with your health and well-being, the two main things that have been coming through are time and motivation. And so I kind of wanted to speak to those two things a little bit, bearing in mind that we're all so different in our personalities, in the way that our lives are, our work, whether or not we have a family or any other commitments and that kind of thing. And so the first one I'm going to talk about is time, because time is a funny thing, isn't it? It seems to be a really big currency for us. It's almost a bit of like an elusive thing because, sometimes you can sit there and however much time has passed by, and you sort of sit there and think, what have I done, or how have I invested or spent my time during this window, whether it be like an hour or two or three or however long it is. And so a lot of us have been saying and sharing with me that we don't have enough time to invest in our well-being at this particular point in time. And so I just wanted to sort of offer a bit of a reframe around that, because that age-old saying is that we all have the same amount of time in a day. And although that is true, we all have very, very vastly different lives. So someone who has a family is going to be spending their time a lot differently to someone who doesn't. Someone who runs their own business or doesn't have, or works part-time, is going to spend their time a lot differently to someone who has a full-time job. And so I think it's more about sort of tuning into how you are spending your time currently. And it's a really interesting exercise to do. I've done this myself before, but even if it's just a few days or a week, kind of writing down, not like minute by minute, but just being the observer of how you're spending your time. And you could potentially pick up some pockets of time that you could take back to invest back into yourself. So maybe that's time scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but those different social platforms. Maybe you find yourself scrolling through one of those and getting a little bit lost in it all. Whereas if you perhaps put your phone on flight mode for 5, 10 or 15 minutes, and maybe you could sit in meditation, or maybe you could sit in nature or have a cup of tea or something, whatever fills you up. And also just being aware of where you could potentially hack time a little bit. So I'm thinking, like, say, for example, if you would like to start a regular meditation practice and you feel like you don't have time, I feel like it's always can be a really beautiful and a really powerful thing to, whatever you want to prioritize in your life, if you can try and do it in the morning, because then at least that it's getting done, it's getting prioritized, it's getting pushed up to the top of the priority list. And so I feel like we can all find an extra 15 minutes of time in our day to invest in whatever the thing is that's going to elevate our life. So whether or not that is getting up earlier, whether or not that is placing a boundary on yourself around social media, just using that example again. But I think, the number one thing maybe as the first step is just to observe where you're spending your time and see if there's some ways that you can just tweak that a bit to work a little bit more in your favor. And the second thing I wanted to speak to was motivation. And I've written a blog about this before, actually, a little while ago, about how motivation is fleeting. And I really think too that this is sort of can align with our personality type, because sometimes certain personalities and certain people are more intrinsically motivated. They don't really have to push it, they don't really have to strive to be motivated. That's just how they are. That's just a part of who they are and their personality. Whereas for other people, sometimes that can be a really big block and a really big barrier to allow them to step forward to where they want to go. And so there's no magic pill, there's no quick fix, there's nothing that I can really say to help you to be motivated all the time, because that's not realistic for most of us, number one. And number two, it ebbs and flows. That's just the nature of it all. But what I will say is that I feel like, connecting with your why, your reason for why you want to do a particular thing. And so, as an example, we can use the meditation example again, or we could use wanting to start a yoga practice, or you want to start going to the gym, whatever your personal preference is or your personal goal or aspiration is. Maybe having a think about why you want to do it in the first place, because when we connect to that, that's going to be a really good reminder of why we're doing the things that we're doing. And then once you start to do that thing regularly, or things, if you've got more than one thing that you want to work on regularly, being aware of how it makes you feel afterwards. So using the example of meditation again, if you sit in meditation and once you come out of the meditation, notice how you feel. Notice the benefit, notice the potential struggle that's followed, because, meditation is not always peaceful when we sit down to meditate, but just being aware and observant. And I think that's probably a good piece of advice for any of this work, is just to be more self-aware. And even if you think that you are self-aware, just, tune into, is there a way that I can be more self-aware? So yeah, being more self-aware and connecting with your why, your reason for doing it. And then once you start to do the thing that you want to do more often, and you start to cultivate a devotion to it, and you start to cultivate dedication to it, a level of dedication, then you start to build confidence in yourself that, I can in fact do this thing regularly that I know is going to enhance my life. So there were the two main things that, I've really been noticing and hearing from people lately, is time and motivation. So maybe try those two things out, being aware of, and conscious of where you're spending and investing your time, and see if you can tweak it. And the second thing is, how can you connect with your why and build your confidence in maintaining motivation in a way that feels good for you, and in a way that does not make you feel pressured or like you're failing if you don't do it. So that's my thoughts on those two things. Let me know if any of it resonates, and also let me know and let anyone else know who's reading through if you have any tips around those two things, maybe time management and also tips for motivation, because it's always good, and that's how we learn when we share with each other.